Um, I really struggled with what I was going to say when I introduced our next speaker for the Real People, Real Jesus series that we've done this summer. I struggled because I didn't want to just stand up here and express what a spectacular human being that I believe that he is. I didn't want to just blabber on with just wonderful words. And I also didn't really, there was a small part of me that wanted to embarrass him, but I didn't really want to embarrass him. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to choose a word that I feel would best describe our friend today. Just one word. And the Webster's Dictionary was too generic, and it wasn't near long enough or descriptive enough. So I Googled this, and I found this to be true. A selfless person goes beyond his concerns and emphasizes with others. They're compassionate and understanding of others. They are humble. They have a broader view, and they truly listen. Not just hear, they truly listen to others. A selfless person puts themselves in others' position, and they say we instead of I. They celebrate successes together, and they face failure alone. And they find pleasure in helping others to see happiness. I think that you will agree that this word, selfless, best describes our friend Jonathan Bradley this morning. Thank you.
Tony, I love you. I feel it's only fair that I have a Red Bull up here. I just don't think it would be right if I did not. So I'm going to go ahead and set it there. So I'm going to flip-flop back and forth on a few different things in my life, so just bear with me with time frames and everything. So when I was first asked about this, Real People, Real Jesus, I started just think about all the times in my life where if anybody were to question me and say, hey, where is your proof that Jesus exists? Where have you personally seen Jesus in your life? And what just floored me is the number of instances that just came flooding into my head. So I'm going to try and start at the beginning, but like I said, we'll backtrack a few times here and there. In September of '95, I met my wonderful wife, Cheryl, sitting over there. We both grew up in Florida. We met in high school. Ironically, it was kind of funny because I had technically seen her the year before and told my best friend that I was going to date her. And he, of course, said, yeah, right. And actually, it was that friend that pointed it out a couple of years later that, yeah, that was that same girl. So I got the last laugh on that. Me and her just clicked. She was my partner. She was beyond my best friend. And we did everything together, and it truly helped me heal from a lot of stuff that I had gone through in my life. However, graduation came 2 years later, and I was heartbroken because my plans were to come up here to Wisconsin, and her plans were to stay in Florida to go to school because she had scholarships that were good only at Florida colleges. It tore me up beyond belief, and it was the first time that I experienced Jesus, even though I don't even know how well I knew Jesus back then. But it was the first time I experienced His grace. Because as we're making the long trip to Wisconsin, I just started crying because I felt as if I had lost my best friend. And I felt like the odds that it was going to work out was slim because, of course, everybody and their mother tells you, oh, long distance, it's never going to work. I mean, I don't think we had a single person who was on our side saying, yeah, you guys can do this. And so I started crying. And all of a sudden, I pass an overpass, and it says, big, bold words, trust. Get a couple miles down the road, next one, in, and then the final one, Jesus. And I sat there and I prayed. And I hadn't done that hardly at all. And I said, God, just please, let me have this one thing. I need this. So 2 years later, I get a phone call from Cheryl. And she says, I'm coming up. I'm done with my schooling. I'm coming up. And I just looked up and I was like, God, thank you. Because the thing that killed me was that I in no way, shape, or form deserve that. Nothing that I had done, none of my actions did I deserve that. But he gave it to me. So then we were together, and it didn't take long before we started our family. Because one of the big things that we had very much in common was we wanted a family. We wanted a chance to create a family that was not what we grew up with, that did not have the brokenness that we had. And it was very important to us. So along comes Rachel, and that was the next step. Cheryl goes in for a C-section, and all of a sudden, Rachel gets stuck, and she's struggling for air. So they call for an emergency C-section. And I'll never forget, it's funny now, it wasn't funny then, but I remember the nurse coming into the doctor and said, he had told the doctor, you need to prep the emergency, or the operating team, because we have to go in now. And the nurse came back a few minutes later and said, I got a hold of them. They're at Denny's right now, and they want to know if they can finish their meal. And his response, no, they need to get here now. So that, of course, hit me, because I'm going, okay, this is our first step, and this is not going as planned. So again, I prayed to God, please just give me this. And lo and behold, took way too long, but she finally decided to come out and grace us with her presence. So then, 3 years later, Katie came along. Katie was a little bit simpler. Don't worry, she'll make up for it later. But here we were with our 2 children, and I just sat there and I went like, everything was going to plan. Everything. Almost too well. And I just kept thinking, what's going to happen, because I don't deserve this. Something's got to go wrong, because this is not the way my life goes. It's just not. So July 22nd of 2015, we took a family bike trip. We were directly across from the library in Delavan. And Rachel said, guys, I got to stop. So we said, okay. So we stopped, and she was just kind of standing next to her bike. And all of a sudden, her eyes rolled back into her head, and she fell over. And the only thing I remember, because Cheryl amazingly caught her before she hit her head, but her little sister went from being the most happy little girl to being beyond devastated. You could see in her eyes she was crushed in a second. And it killed me as her father to see her like that. Paramedics came. Unfortunately, I didn't even get the worst of this. I didn't even know about this until after the fact. But they told Cheryl on the way to the hospital, we have to give her a shot, and it's going to stop her heart. We have to get it re-going in a better rhythm. That's not good words to hear as a parent. It might make perfect medical sense. Those are not good words. So what did we do? We prayed. We had friends of ours who prayed. Get to the hospital, they do every test under the sun, and come to find out, they don't know. They have no idea. They give us a lot of, well, it could be this, and it could be that, it could be this, could be that, but we really don't know. She's good. And here we are 10 years later, and things are good. So here I am with my entire family, and again, I don't deserve this. I hadn't done anything for God. In fact, if anything, I've gone the exact opposite. So why did He give me this? October 5th of 2009 was really one of the biggest principles in my life, and that was the death of my grandma. So my grandma she had gotten cancer and was on hospice. And now's a time where I'm going to go back a little bit. My grandma was beyond important to me. Growing up, I had a very bad time with a lot of physical and mental abuse. And my grandmother used to recognize when my mother was about to be triggered. And my grandma would literally go pick fights with her, just so that she would direct it towards her instead of us kids. A lifetime of that, you don't forget that. And so my grandma was so very important to me. So I don't know why, but for some reason I did not want her to be alone when she passed. However, as you guys, some of you probably know, when somebody's on hospice, you don't know one day to the other. So, at the time, I'm working full time, and, I don't know whether I should call in this day. Do I go into work? Every single day was just a decision. Is today going to be the day that she passes? So I turned around one day and I said, you know what? I'm not going to go to work. I'm going to go over, spend time with my grandma. At the time, I was a smoker, and I was just about to walk outside for a cigarette, and then I just got this feeling that, you know what, I need to go see my grandma first. And I walk over, and she starts to take her last breaths. And I got to be there and hold her hand while she passed. And the crazy thing is, you guys all know, apparently I didn't know back then, she wasn't alone. She wouldn't have been alone even if I wasn't there. And obviously God knew that, but He still gave it to me. He knew it was important to me, and He gave it to me. Why? I didn't deserve it. Did not deserve it at all, but He gave it to me. This hit me so hard that it really started to make me rethink, you know what? I always believed in Jesus, but I also didn't know Jesus. And I also did not live out my faith. So in April of 2011, we stepped foot into the river. And we started down a crazy journey. Tony was one of the first people. I know that's a shocker to everybody, but she was one of the first people. And it was very interesting because at the time I wasn't exactly a huggy person back then. But Tony, of course, did what Tony does, and she walks up and throws her arms around me, and I just, okay. She's just got that way about her. At the time I started to go to the river, I was having something going on in the background of my life that I didn't understand, but was terrifying. At least 3 times a week for a matter of years, minimum 2 years, I was having dreams. And the dreams were always the same dream, just a different premise. It was always the end of the world, some apocalyptic event, and I always ended up with my family and my 2 children looking at me. And every time, they just had fear in their eyes, as you would expect one to do if the world's about to end and everything's coming down around you. And it just crushed me because every time it was like taking a piece of my soul. Because you see your children in that much fear and that much pain, and it just kills you. And obviously, I knew this has to mean something. Why is this happening? Why am I having these recurring dreams? I mean, because if you do the math on that, that's a lot of dreams. And it was consistent. Well, funny thing, within 6 months of starting to go to the river, my dreams were gone. And after some reflection, I realized that I don't think it had to do with my children's fear, it had to do with mine. I had to come to terms. I had to start that pathway and include my children and my family. And then that gave me the peace I needed to stop letting it rule up here. We jumped in pretty fast. Literally the next year, we did a family mission trip to New Orleans. That was wild. First of all, just to trust, I don't remember numbers, so please don't quote me, but it was a lot of money you had to raise for 4 people. And the first thing was like, how am I going to raise all this money? And so, everybody had just said, if money is the issue, don't worry about it, just trust. And guess what? All the money came in plus some. No problems. So we get down to New Orleans and had many, many interesting experiences, but one that stands out above the rest was we were at a place called Eagle Street, and it was literally in the middle of the ghetto, but the partners that we were with had a vacation Bible school that they were doing right in the middle of it. So we went there, and we took the girls with, and it was my and the girls' job to walk out into the neighborhood and try and get kids to come. And in this moment, a little girl came up, and she was talking to us, and we were telling her about the class and everything. And she had an older brother who came over, probably late teens. And as we're standing there talking, he does not look quite happy that we're talking to her. And then his shirt just moves just right, and I can see that there's a pistol right there in his pants. I did so much praying in my head at that moment and just said, God, come on now. This can't be what you had in mind. This can't be how this goes down. Like, you called us here. I know you did. So now we need your protection. Well, guess what? Nothing happened. Kid ended up being a very nice kid. We had a conversation. He obviously did not come, but his little sister did. And and everything turned out to be fine. But that was a huge exercise in trusting him, because I had both our little girls there, and it could have been all over right then and there. So then we have 3 years later, and I take a mission trip to Wahiawa. This one is also got its adventures. But I had 2 things that happened on that trip. One was we were out visiting the homeless. And in Wahiawa, it is literal, they're like literal cities of homeless people. And we went and we talked to a lady whose name was Erica, ironically. And it was so crazy to me because we were talking to her, we were giving her some food and stuff, and she just kept apologizing. She's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, my place is such a mess. Her children were running around. They knew nothing. Like, they didn't understand that this is not normal. They were living the life that they knew. And it just tore me up, because where my mind went was, why? Why, God? I don't understand. No, you're giving me all this stuff. What about her? What about those children who are sitting here sleeping in a tent on the side of the road and don't understand that that's not normal, that that's not the way life should be? So that stemmed the second event, which is funny little detail about that trip. The car rental place actually lost our car, or rented our car that we had rented. So they had to substitute and give us a different vehicle, and the only thing they had was a convertible, which was pretty nice. So when we were driving places, we had the top down and just enjoying the wonderful scenery and just the beauty that is over there. And at one point I was sitting in the back, and Wes and Chad were sitting in the front, and I just started having a chat with God. And I started asking him these things. Why? You need to explain this to me. You need to explain to me, because I don't deserve any of this. Where's my diagnosis of a terminal cancer? Where's my living on the streets? Where is any of that? Because I don't see it, and I certainly don't deserve this. So you don't understand. And we're going to go back to God's answer to me a little bit later. I'm going to pull a Chris Johnson with this one. We'll come back to that later. So the overall premise with coming to the river is I had finally found a family. I had found a spiritual family, but it didn't take long before I really realized that this was more than just friendships with people. This was becoming family. And that was something that my family desperately needed. In June 2012, Cheryl's brother, we got a phone call that he was in the hospital because his appendix burst. So got out to the prayer warriors, guys, can we please be praying? At first, it didn't seem like that big of a deal. He had a surgery, they got him cleaned up, and, he's good, he's out. Well, the next thing you know, he's back in the hospital. He did this about 3 times. And the last time, they didn't think he was going to make it because they just couldn't get all the infection. When it burst, it had got everywhere, and they couldn't seem to get it under control. Now, not only was this Cheryl's brother, but Cheryl's brother, he should have been my brother. I have 4 brothers, and these are different stories, but I don't have relationships with almost any of them. I had one relationship with my oldest brother, and he passed when he was 49. So I still remember I was involved enough. I don't remember how I was involved at the river at that moment, but I was involved enough that I was stopping by the office to pick up something. And I don't even remember everybody who was there, but I definitely remember Erica was there. And I remember going in, and they said, "What's the matter?" And I was like, "What do you mean, what's the matter?" "Your face, something's the matter." And I just began sobbing, because this could not happen. Don't look at me. After a month of being in the hospital, and a month used to seem like a long time. In today's world, think about how long a month is to be in the hospital. Now they're getting you out sometimes, even for full surgeries, you don't even stay in a day. He was in for an entire month while they struggled to get it under control. But we finally got the call that I'm out of the hospital. But of course, we're leery because, well, we've heard this before. A couple weeks go by, everything's good. And finally, a few months go by, we go visit him, everything's fine. So here I am again. I know I asked you for this, but I didn't deserve this. And you keep giving me things that I don't deserve. So then in December of 2020, this was a hard one. Because this was the first time God didn't give what was asked. Rachel had a friend of hers that she met in middle school. Her name was Allie. A lot of you probably know her. And she got sick with a rare brain disease. And she ended up passing away. She was like our daughter. And we prayed and we prayed. We prayed individually. We prayed as a church. We went to her home. But she ended up passing away. So now you try and wrap your head around it. And I think you get to a point where you have to understand that we can't possibly understand. He created the world with a snap of his fingers. He put breath into every single one of us. We can't know why things happen the way they do. But we have to believe that he knows what is best. And it's hard. Because our pain becomes so great that we overlook that. And it's so easy when something like this happens that we overlook and are blindsided by all the things that we did, all the times we did get what we didn't deserve. And then you have what happened next, which is okay. These terrible things happened. We're in a lot of pain. We miss her. We feel so bad for her family. And then you start to see out of the ashes, Jesus is still there. And what made me see that was a little boy that stands about this tall. He really needs a haircut. He's run around here a lot, made a lot of noise, probably at inappropriate times. And all I can think about is the Bible tells us this. God works all things for good. And there's so much that we don't know that God does. But I'll tell you what I do know. I have no doubt that that little boy just belongs exactly where he's at. See, when we were having our family given to us by God, we had a miscarriage in between the two girls. Then after Katie, we had a second miscarriage. And the doctors said, well, she's probably never going to be able to carry full term again. And if she does, she will have to be on the special medication that is not approved by insurance, and it runs about $900 a month for the whole pregnancy. So after the last miscarriage, Cheryl said, I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. And I said, okay. I said, all I ask is give it 6 months. Because right now, you have so much emotion running through you. Just wait 6 months. If you still feel that way, let's do it. And 6 months later, she still did. And I absolutely supported her in that decision. But that doesn't mean that I didn't always want a little boy. But I just chalked it up that that's not in the cards for me, and that's okay. He knows what's best, not me. And then this little guy comes around, and how quickly it was to see God say, you wanted your little boy, right? There you go. It might not be what you thought. It might be a lot more than you thought. But here he is. So then I just go back to another thing that, okay, even in the worst circumstances, God gave. And he gave big. Because let me tell you, I don't know where we'd be right now without that little boy. He is beyond part of our family. Okay. Almost there, guys. So February of this year, I have to tell a little story real quick. So when Allie passed, Allie collected animals, and she had 2 cats that before she got sick and everything, she had actually tried to convince us to take these cats, and we're like, we're good. We got 3 cats. We're good. And when Allie got sick, we went over and we were taking care of them every day and making sure they got good their food and still maintained their health. And however, when Allie passed, it was like a no-brainer. Yeah, we're getting the cats. She's getting her way. And she's up there laughing about it right now. So in February, though, of this year, I get a text from Cheryl, and she says, honey, one of the cat's names is Paul Print. And she says, Paul Print's not doing so well. And I said, oh, how bad is it? And she's like, I don't know. It looks pretty bad. So I go home, and I find Paul Print hiding under the bed, and he just has saliva dripping everywhere. Now, when I was in high school, I worked for a vet for 2 years, and this cat did not look. I didn't want to tell her at the time, but this cat did not look long for this world. Took it to the vet, and we had to wait till the following day because that was the first opening they had. But I prayed, and I just said, God, this is going to rip Rachel apart. Don't get me wrong. I love Paul Print, but specifically, it would have tore Rachel apart. Because in those cats is a piece of Allie. And I said, God, please, I need your intervention. Take it to the vet. And vet says a very weird thing. He says, well, I don't know what's going on because he's in perfect health. Everything's perfect. And same thing as Rachel when she went to the doctor. I can give you lots of scenarios as far as what it could be, but he's in perfect health. So a day goes by. I think it was a total of probably 3 days that he left a trail everywhere he went. And then on day 4, he ate for the first time. And I just said, thank you, God. Thank you. He came out of hiding, and now he's running around causing mischief and doing all the things. But it was just another instance that I prayed, and God gave. And yet, I didn't deserve. This last one just happened last week. It may not fit into where all the rest were, but I definitely saw Jesus, so I feel it's appropriate to put it in there. I have a person in my life who, at one point, hated my guts, to the point he wanted to inflict bodily harm on me, to the extent law enforcement almost had to get involved. The situation ended, and we still know each other. We still see each other. And I definitely have moved past it. He has moved past it. But it just makes what happened that much more intense. I knew that he was having a hard time with his child. He's got a 18-year-old, and I knew he was, from other sources, that he was having a real hard time. And so I was going to leave one day, and I saw him in a parking lot, and I pulled up next to him, and I said, hey, buddy, I've been meaning to talk to you for a while. I just wanted you to know I've been thinking about you. I've been praying about it, because I know you're going through a lot right now. And he stands there, and he just stares directly into my eyes. And for a minute, I was a little afraid that I had stepped somewhere I shouldn't and reopened a can of something. Instead, all of a sudden, I see tears just fill up his eyes. And I put out my hand to shake his hand. Keep in mind, I am in my truck. He is standing next to my truck. I put out my hand, he grabs my hand, he pulls me in, and just starts hugging me and starts sobbing into my shoulder. How do you not see Christ in that? This person wanted me dead. And now he's sobbing into my shoulder. So we're going to go back to the trip where I had the conversation, the Wahiawa trip, when I had the conversation with God. And the conclusion to my talk with God. God said to me, you seem to be confusing two things. There's a difference between being deserving and having worth. And if you don't think that you have worth, I sent my son to die on the cross for you. And if I have to pull you from your home and get you away from every distraction you have to get it, that's what I'll do. Because you need to understand that. Because you obviously don't. I know I've heard this before, sitting where you guys are sitting, but I just wanted to pull this up real quick. I've heard this before. The music is not picked by whoever's speaking. But talk about fitting, talk about the Holy Spirit working. I've been afraid, I've been hiding. Afraid I've let you down. Inside, I doubt that you still love me. But in your eyes, there's only grace now. Though I fall, you can make me new. From this death, I will rise with you. Oh, the grace reaching out to me. How can it be? That's what I wanted to know all this time. How can it be? And how it can be is from the other song. Because his love never fails. And just to finish up, I just want to read a passage because this so sums up my experience with Jesus in this life. It's Romans 8:31 to 39. What shall we say about such wonderful things as these? If God is for us, who can ever be against us? Since he did not spare even his own son, but gave him up for all of us, won't he also give us everything else? Who dares accuse us, whom God has chosen for his own? No one, for God himself has given us right standing with himself. Who then will condemn us? No one. For Christ died for us and was raised to life for us, and he is sitting in the place of honor at God's right hand pleading for us. Can anything separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity or are persecuted or hungry or... I'm guessing that's no, God. Okay. Or persecuted or hungry or destitute or in danger or threatening with death? No, despite all these things, overwhelming victory is ours through Christ who loves us. And I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons. Neither our fears for today, nor our worries about tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. No power in the sky above or in earth below, indeed nothing in all of creation, will ever be able to separate us from the love of God that is revealed in Christ Jesus. Thank you, guys.
Well, you know, Jonathan set up our time at the table better than I ever could. What he had to say, as long as we're surrendered and we're obedient to Jesus, it's so crazy how he orchestrates it down to the perfect song for what it is that you're going to be speaking about. This is the table where Jesus resides. This is the place of love and grace and mercy. It's the table of hope. It is the table of peace. All because of what Jesus did on his walk to the cross and his gift of eternal life for us when he laid down there. So don't let that escape you today. Don't let that escape that God set it up, that we don't deserve it, but he did it for us anyway. Mike and Patty are going to help with a communion this morning. So just settle yourselves in, have a little talk with Jesus, and when you are ready, please come forward.